Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 32nd audio file in the audiocast series known as the Q News Patriot. I am the Q News Patriot. My name is SGAnon. Very good to be back with you today. It has been a little while. Things get very active in life towards the end of the year, the end of the holiday season. Certainly, things have accelerated in my day job, requiring a bit more from me. And then, of course, family commitments and things of that nature. All of you know how that goes. We've had quite an interesting time over these last few weeks, especially over these last 10 days or so. And we've just really seen quite an acceleration in geopolitical goings on, as well as in our personal lives. And so tonight's file is going to cover a lot of different things. We're going to talk a little bit about Russia, what Putin and Russia are doing currently, steps that the Russian military is preparing to take both in Ukraine and in other areas of operation that we have yet to see yet, or excuse me, that we have yet to see, but that we will see. We're going to talk a little bit about Xi and bin Salman and how Putin, Xi, and bin Salman are working in tandem at the present time to bankrupt the petrodollar, the US dollar, and bring down the deep state financial apparatus. That is, of course, part of what we have to see going through this process in order to arrive at the other side of things. We're going to talk about military activity in Europe and in North America and in South America. We're also going to discuss a little bit about the Caribbean operations, ongoing underground and underground DUMBs and networks and things of that nature. This is still an active wartime situation. These are still battlefields that are contested in some regards, primarily captured, primarily controlled, but there are still areas that have to be cleaned up. There are still large concentrations of, I'm not sure how to say it, large concentrations of things that we would like to preserve rather than see destroyed. And we need to be very careful and very deliberate about how we reclaim those, and especially about how we destroy these networks so that we can sort of controlled demolition everything without causing problems with things like the Earth's crust, underground cavern systems and caves, and ensuring that the escape routes are cut off deliberately, purposefully to prevent these people from getting away. We're going to talk a little bit about just the power shifts that are happening. There's a lot of things that have been moving sort of in our favor. The narrative is completely lost. We're now starting to see that in the mainstream media space. We're also starting to see that pretty significantly on Twitter. If you've been following trends on Twitter in recent days, everything from Jay Epstein to Fauci files, Twitter exposed, CIA, PSYOP, things of this nature. These are trends that are going on right now, and that's an enormous statement to have those things trending. Twitter is the public square. It is the social media platform, currently the preeminent one in the world, if you will. It reaches pretty much everyone. It has an enormous number of participants in important areas in both government and society, business, and things of that nature. Military participate on Twitter. They have official profiles on Twitter. And so this is a really good place to go for sort of taking the pulse on things at the, the governmental, I hate to use the term ruling class, but that is a good way to put it, those individuals who currently have power and control. We get an idea of where they're going with their narratives. We get an idea of what to expect. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to conclude tonight's file with a bit of a discussion on our spiritual nature and the spiritual walk of this journey, the spiritual nature of this journey. It has become apparent to me recently that I've done, even though I'd bring up the spirituality portion of this journey, I've done sort of a poor job emphasizing the connectivity across all different theaters of spiritual interpretation, all different understandings of our spiritual nature. So I'm going to do my best tonight at the end of our file to sort of try and tie that in without giving you all an unfair or an inappropriate pointing in a certain direction. There's a very important reason that I don't discuss this topic ad nauseum. There's a very important reason that I do my best to give an even keeled, very objective understanding of things as it pertains to this topic, simply because it's important all of us, each of you out there, all of your sleepers and normies, and just, all of us in our social spheres come around to the understanding of our spiritual nature and our spiritual reality organically and in our own meaningful way. And so we're going to discuss just a little bit about that tonight. It is an important thing to remember. Our DNA is far more than simply molecules. Our DNA is our conduit to, our conduit to God, our conduit to infinite love, our conduit to that, the creator of all things that sustains all things in the moment. And we can have conscious access and, in a limited fashion, conscious control of that particular portion of our bodies, of our mental, emotional, spiritual apparatus. So we're going to discuss a little bit about that tonight as well. Merry belated Christmas to all of you out there who celebrate. Happy Hanukkah to, excuse me, those of the Hebraic Jewish faith. And Happy New Year. It's been quite a year, hasn't it? We've had quite the journey. We've discovered so much. And many of you out there have actually woken up this year. You are to be commended for that coming around. This is a difficult process to go through. The awakening is certainly, it certainly has impact for everyone in a personal way. It has a story behind it for all of us. And those of us who needed more time, needed better conditions or different conditions to present themselves to allow our spiritual life force and our conscious mental, our thought body, our purposefulness in this life to come around to certain truths, that's okay. This process is about ensuring that mankind can live freely, that we can prepare generations to come later that will know a certain freedom of movement, a freedom of thought, a freedom of technology that none of us could ever really conceive truly, even in our wildest dreams. And so understanding that this is a journey primarily for that sort of helps us understand why things have had to be the way that they've had to be. It certainly has not been a pleasant journey by any means. Many of us out there are experiencing familial pain and loss, financial struggling, hardship, evictions, loss of property, things of this nature. I myself am not immune to that. And so it has been a hard fought, a hard won battle, if you will. But we win this war in the end because we are here now in this present moment. We are having this discussion. I'm able to record something like this and get it to all of you. It's not immediately shut down and removed. We are winning this struggle, but it is a long journey. We have to bring humanity into the fold in such a way that it holds impact and purpose and drive. It has a personal touch for everyone. It certainly has a personal touch for me and has had a personal touch for me for a very long time. I was having a discussion just the other day with a family member, and we were discussing just the different struggles of life right now, and things that have been going on, and some of the things that have been so challenging for individuals out there that sort of kind of have an idea of what's going on. And he said back to me, he said, SG, there's a lot to understand about the nature of things, but there's a lot to be said about having some faith in the love and God that sustains us all to see things through in an appropriate way that will provide security and understanding and knowledge for his creation, all of us, this world, this beautiful realm, this incredible universe that we're a part of, for all of the posterity and generations to come from now on. And so understanding that this is primarily an exercise in sort of ascending out of our human minds, our human constrained thoughts, our worries, our fears, things that we know are not of, that higher spiritual place. Being able to do so even when the plight is occurring is really a good part of this journey. Could liken it to Daniel in the lion's den, if you would. The story from the good book discusses, a man that was essentially tossed to the lions to be food, but was able to come up out of his human limitations, connect with that spiritual place, bring the peace of God that surpasses all understanding into that physical place that he was in. He brought it not only into his body, but by virtue of his body, brought it into that space. And the lions did not eat him. That's sort of what we're dealing with right now. We're all learning how to control our spiritual apparatus, how to hear that inner voice, how to understand where our spiritual power comes from, so that we can insulate ourselves moving forward, and so that we can control and direct the energy that creates worlds. We are all miniature creators in the sense of the word, if you will, made in the image and likeness of the creator of all things. And so in a limited form, we have very real effect on this earth. We have very real capabilities found through our spiritual energetic centers, if you will. And we have at least 7 of them. I've heard as many as 9, but we certainly have at least 7 of them throughout our makeup. We're a multidimensional being. All of us out there, each of you listening to this, have capability to see into the future, to imagine things as you wish them to be, to recall into the past and to see what things have been, and to apply knowledge derived from all experiences, both of yours and from others that have interacted with you. And yet you also still have, beyond that, the access to, infinite love that can inspire you to incredible things. And sometimes that incredible thing is not necessarily incredible in the sense that it impresses the entire world, but it is incredible to you in the sense that it is perfect for you. It's perfect for the timing where you're at. Controlling and directing these things consciously is something that we are all capable of doing. And we have been repressed in every sense of the word for generations, going back thousands and thousands of years. So, I hope that sort of brings a little bit of peacefulness to all of you out there that have been sort of very concerned about why these things take so long. There are still operations that are continuing. There are still things that have to be done. There are still portions of the population that have to come around to this awake and aware place of their own volition, of their own free will. They have to do so at a pace that is meaningful and purposeful and impactful to them. A great deal of them will encounter very severe pain as they go through their awakening process, while other patriots out there who are awake now or who are beginning to awake will sort of already be prepared for that sort of discomfort. This process will get a little bit more uncomfortable before it gets better. We as mankind have sort of a history of needing things to really have a very big impact on us civilizationally before our generational consciousness can be affected. And that's really what we're trying to control and direct here going into the future, is a new consciousness in the world, a new level of thought, a new level of living, a new way of life. And to achieve that, we all have to come around to the same ideas, um, within a relatively short amount of time. And that's the process that we've been living through now for approximately 4 to 5 years. So, you know, all I can say to each of you out there is that I understand your discomfort very much. I pay the same prices for the goods and services that you do, but we have not arrived yet at that precipice moment. Um, there are still things that have to be done as it pertains to the neutralization of biological agents around the world. There are still things that have to be done as it pertains to the neutralization of deep intelligence agency assets and sleeper cells. There are still things that have to be done as it pertains to CCP, espionage cells. Additionally, we're working overtime to overtake the lamestream media through lawful channels, and we are doing our best to insulate the country against things such as mass casualty, false flags, nuclear events of this sort of the type of sum of all fears, things of that nature. So this is a very grand process, sort of an enormous, all-encompassing war that we're all living through. The fact that all of you have gotten here to this point and you are still tuned in, you are still ready to press forward, you are still ready to go forth and to spread the good news, that really speaks to the quality of characters of all of you out there. A great many of you listening may not agree with me fully. A great many of you listening don't agree with me at all. And I still commend you for coming to a broadcast like this and others like it and attempting to understand what is going on in the world, whether it is to disprove somebody or whether it is to further your own understanding. You're contributing to the expansion of knowledge and the expansion of the human consciousness. That's sort of the genius of it at the spiritual, the God force level that controls and sustains all. There's really no way that we fail. No weapon formed against the righteous shall prosper. And that is what we're seeing right now. Now, many of you might say, well, we've lost a lot of people along the way, so weapons have definitely been prosperous. And I would say, well, weapons are prosperous if they contribute to the victory of the opposing force. But in this particular instance, the opposing force is on its last leg fighting for its life. That last leg does have capabilities that we have to be wary of. And that last leg does happen to be very large in expanse and encompassment, but it is the last leg. At this point, weapons, casualties, things that we take into our side of things as we account, as we experience and account for this military civilian alliance that is sort of going on around the world. We have to take into account that while we may absorb those things, we are not losing this. And so I would contend with all of you that this is a situation where we are prospering despite our losses. We've just recently seen mainstream media in Ireland outing Pfizer for exactly what it is. Pfizer knew their vaccine would kill. It was run it was a front headline, I believe, buried within the newspaper itself, but it was a very large headline in an Irish newspaper. Additionally, we've seen articles coming from the Daily Mail and others discussing this sort of pandemic number 2 agenda that the NWO seems to be reaching for, what remains of the NWO. This is a process where the COVID-19 crime was launched on humanity as the first phase of a multi-phase plan to not only destroy America, but to invert and change the world financial order of power. We saw the largest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the corporate executive ruling class, the elected class, if you will, from 2020, late 2019, early 2020, into mid 2021 that has ever been recorded in human history. So as we go through this process, we're We have to appreciate that there are things going on behind the scenes on both sides that have been driving events. The pandemic was always a multi-phase event. It was never going to be a simple one shot off. Um, it's my belief that as we go through this, destroying the last of their power structures, as we go through these end chess moves, if you will, that we're going to see more and more pushing for sort of the end results of their agenda, their CBDC currencies, their control of commerce and bank accounts at the residential, the local community level. And we may also see other things such as, reattempted pandemics, lockdowns, mandates, things of this nature. Um, all I can say as it pertains to all of that is it's coming from an increasingly desperate and increasingly disorganized enemy. We have essentially caused them to panic themselves into disastrous counter moves. The awakening is full steam ahead. There's nothing they can do to stop that. And the moves that they have left in the game, agendas that they're seeking to push towards, are being shown for what they are in mere hours in some cases. So as we go through this process, just please understand that this white hat alliance, this military alliance around the world, is sort of up against a clock, if you will. We have multiple stages to everything that the black hat deep state has always done. They're very patient, very shrewd, very long suffering enemy. And so we're also dealing with, how do we respond to that in the most effective fashion? We're going to go ahead and move on now to some of the stuff going on in Eastern Europe. We have Ukraine actively attempting to provoke World War III and to provoke NATO into the conflict. I do believe that we're going to see a large escalation of that conflict as we go through the first portions of 2023. 2023 is going to be a big year. We have Russia coordinating with Turkey and the Belarusian military, and has been for some time now. The Belarusian foreign ministry today reached out to the Ukrainian government and summoned an emissary and was rebuffed by the Ukrainian government. They then released a statement stating that the missile that fell from Ukraine the Ukrainian missile that fell into Belarus was unlikely to have been an accident. They also released a statement that Belarus is capable of essentially participating in inter-organizational military operations at the drop of a hat. We're seeing a setup going on in Eastern Europe for a much broader conflict, a much broader situation, if you will. And I think that it has to get a little bit broad before it gets better. We're going to see Poland and Finland join this conflict before it's over. We're going to see the Baltic states involved in this conflict before it is over. Belarus, Lukashenko has a very interesting position because they will be facing a sort of a two-front, possibly three-front situation. The Russian military, it's my understanding based on some of the research I've been doing, has been shipping resources essentially all over the western portion of Mother Russia, down to the Ukrainian war front, equipment transferred across over into Belarus, equipment being transferred to the Finnish Russian border up around St. Petersburg. It's my understanding that these tunneling systems, which sort of connect all of the Eastern European caverns underneath the Baltic Sea and into the Nordic states, have to be cleaned out. And we have some actors presently in governments in those countries that are not willing to participate peacefully in the cleaning out of that ancient evil, that ancient corruption locus of control. And so Putin has been sort of setting Russia up to be insulated against the fall of the dollar and also a conflict that could involve NATO in some form or fashion. We've seen a direct conflict right now between Russian forces and various forces and equipment from NATO countries. This is almost advantageous to Russia in a way, because if NATO becomes involved in the war, and it's my opinion that they could very well, we have Russian battle-hardened soldiers that have already that have already been up against this sort of technological capability. And so Putin is very well aware of this. Putin knows that Russia, the axis, the alliance between Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey is a world-changing alliance, and the man is not stupid by any means. He just recently issued a decree on, prohibiting Russian oil. My apologies for the segue there. I had to pause the recording. My neighbor's dogs were having an absolute fit of themselves. I believe we were discussing Russia and Putin. Putin is a very shrewd strategist, an experienced counterintelligence officer, and he understands what's going on with the true levers of power and control in the world. Putin is choosing February 1st of 2023 and onward through midsummer of 2023 to prohibit the sale of Russian oil and gas to nations that introduce a price cap, a price ceiling, if you will. We have a number of NATO countries that have expressed interest in doing so, or who are attempting to do so. And this is really going to push that petrodollar into the choke point. We're trying to get these financial arms, these sort of tentacles that they have all throughout the world to make money for themselves, generate income, both legally and illegally. We're trying to cut all of them off. We've seen as much with the FTX scandal that is soon to affect Binance and other crypto exchanges as well. And that's also going to affect worldwide financial markets. It's a multi-pronged collapsing assault that we have going on against this particular deep state apparatus, and Putin is playing his part. At the same time that Putin is doing this, we have President Xi from China and Crown Prince bin Salman striking a deal for Saudi Arabian oil and gas to China. This sort of sets up China as the premier customer with Saudi Arabia. China and Putin also have very strong economic ties and agreements that they've outlined and are recently conducting search and destroy exercises in the Pacific, specializing specifically in capturing enemy submarines. And we know that submarines, underground submarine pathways, cavern systems, etc., have always been a method of escape, a method of false flag instigation for this deep state, this deep intelligence agency apparatus. As a matter of fact, it was a submarine that destroyed the Office of Naval Intelligence in the U.S. Pentagon on 9/11/2001. The fact that the joint naval alliance between Russia and China, and I believe also between the Chinese Patriots and the U.S. naval Patriots in the Indo-Pacific theater, the fact that they would be pointing towards submarine capture and detection is very fascinating and very telling. At the same time that these exercises are going on, we have underground tunnel destruction happening in the Andes Mountains, certainly beneath Peru and Chile. We have underground tunnels being destroyed in the Caribbean islands, especially in the sort of the Eastern Caribbean area, down through where the Disney Cruise Lines tour, actually. And then we also have tunnel destruction beneath the U.S. Rocky Mountains, the U.S. West Coast, the U.S. East Coast, the Canadian East Coast, and the Canadian West Coast. At the same time that all of this is occurring, we have tunnel destruction being recorded and soldiers having been deployed underground in Central Europe, and those operations are continuing. We are absolutely driving forward with this plan. But as we enter these last phases, it's important to understand that things like the dollar going, maybe not all the way to zero, but certainly far down from where it currently sits, inflation and things of that nature getting worse as we go through that process, I think we need to understand that one sort of begets the other. As we do certain things to the system to throttle its existence and bring it all the way to the ground, we have to acknowledge the damage and pain that that will cause us because we are caught within that system. It's sort of akin to shutting down the matrix while all of us are still awake. Um, as we go through this process, we're going to see those individuals in all societies everywhere, the ones who are asleep, the ones who just can't be bothered to care, the ones who perhaps they're very disheveled and dissatisfied with how things have been going geopolitically in the world for the last 4 or 5 years, certainly within the last 2.5 to 3 years. But they just don't want to be bothered to be active participants in changing that. Those individuals will be the ones as we go through this process to come around. They'll begin by exploring why things have gotten so painful. Blame will be shifted and given to various individuals. We're going to see some extreme economic pain in the Western developed nations, certainly in the Commonwealth realms. We're going to see the forging of new economic alliances and the deepening of economic alliances that are currently being forged. We're moving into a multipolar world. We're moving into a world that has a balanced exchange of commerce and ideals, that has a balanced exchange of value, that has a fair and instantaneous exchange of financial transactions, and a guaranteed encryption and a corruption-free infrastructure within which to do that. But in order to arrive there, we have to acknowledge that the old system is still in our face. We're still paying for oil at the pump here in the United States with a Federal Reserve note. In many countries around the world, the central bank note is still in circulation, despite the quantum financial system currently being outlined and implemented at a very slow but very effective pace in the deep background. As we go through this process, it becomes apparent that things like the BRICS alliance, the new oil alliances that are being formed, the polarities that are being changed are necessary to preserve society for the earth. This infiltration into our society was so deep that it essentially became our society. Look at the culture that our children read and are taught. Look at the fairy tales and the stories that they're given. Look at the understanding of life and the understanding of things like, the flow of money, the exchange of money, the assignment of value. These are things that determine the very basis of a societal setup, and we are sort of changing all of that. And to do that, we have to acknowledge how complete and how total it is, and how bringing it down is a necessary process, but that in order to do so, we're going to have to sort of cause ourselves some pain and some uncertainty along the way. When the Israelites marched through the desert in the Old Testament, the Old Book, they marched through for a generation. It was a number of decades, if I'm not mistaken, 40 years, I believe. And while I don't think this process would take us nearly 40 years, one of the reasons that I believe one of the reasons that process took so long in those days was so that the generational memory of that group of individuals would be sort of forever impacted by the lesson that they were being taught as a civilization. And so even though this process is certainly not going to take 40 years, it's sort of undeniable the lesson that we're being taught as a civilization. We have to be actively involved in controlling and directing the structures of our society. We cannot simply turn it over to individuals who have quite the way with words and a very appealing face or a great backstory or a wonderful, family image, but that at the very core may be questionable. We have to be actively involved in furthering our understanding of our spiritual bodies, our spiritual apparatus. We have to be actively involved in our healthcare. We have to be actively involved in contributing to the knowledge of all of the professional disciplines. we're changing society for the better. And while it is certainly not a 40-year process, it is also not a 4-year process. This is a very long, well, I should rephrase that. This is a large amount of change that we have to implement in a relatively short, a comparably short amount of time. And I think we've seen exactly that. The amount of awakening coming simply from things like the Twitter files, the release of certain pharmaceutical truths going into this new year is astounding. Just over the last few weeks, we've seen truth related to Epstein. We've seen truth related to the intelligence community. We've seen truth related to COVID, the vaccinations, the bioweaponry. We've seen truth related to bioweaponization and government-funded biomedical research. And we've seen truth related to the election cycles being incredibly corrupt and the courts being sort of complicit in all of that. Recently, Carrie Lake was instructed to pay Katie Hobbs legal fees in the amount of $33,000. The symbolism there is completely undeniable when you understand that our enemy is very much interested in that particular number and other numbers as well. This is a back and forth for the directionality of our earth. And I applaud all of you for your sort of steadfastness, even though it has been difficult. Certain things still remain. I'm still of the opinion that we will see some sort of optics pertaining to the commander-in-chief, certainly as it pertains to the Biden Manchurian government attempting to silence him in some fashion. I still believe that we have to have some sort of scare event or false flag event. And that could be anything from a manufactured nuclear scenario to a climate scenario. Could be both. This is sort of an open-ended discussion, if you will. Their playbook is to roll out their most desperate moves at that very last moment, and we're pushing them into those very last moments. The financial, there is a change going on in the financial world at this present time that's sort of undeniable, and we're seeing a large amount of consumer debt being just completely wiped out in that process. Additionally, we're seeing the disabling of certain traditional financial levers, or the complete rerouting of how transactions, especially with local community banks, are handled and processed. I just recently received an email from one of you out there working at a community bank stating that you have been given training for a new financial system, and part of that training involves helping individuals understand what debts they no longer owe. So we know that there are changes going on in the financial system that are sort of incontestable, and we have to look forward into that that time and that place. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start closing out the file. It's been quite the week. It's been quite the last few weeks for me. I appreciate all of your patience with the tech issues that have been going on. I certainly appreciate the questions and concerns that many of you have fielded to me. I do my very best to reach out, interact as well as I can, both on TruthSocial and on the Rumble channel. I do apologize for sort of being in other places, if you will, and not attentive to that particular channel. I know many of you out there are only able to listen in and see the things that I'm seeing when you're on that particular channel. And I'm very grateful for that. I'll do my best to sort of turn over a more active leaf as we go through the 2023 season. After we get through the new year, sort of beginning of year things for my day job, things should slow down just a little bit more in that regard. And I'll have a little bit more time to do things like this. This process involves a lot of research on my end. This process involves a lot of balancing on my end. And I'm not insensitive to, the suffering of all of you out there. I just ask that you be patient with my life scenarios as well. We're doing this for everyone, right? We're doing this for humanity. We're doing this for the grocery store clerks. our neighbors in the community church pew next to us, or in our coworkers at our jobs, or the customers that come in and can be so rude with us sometimes, but are otherwise decent human beings, certainly not deserving of anything like a depopulation agenda. We're doing this for everybody. We're doing this for the trolls. We're doing this for those of you that hear the words that I say and find resonance, and we're doing this for those of you that hear the words that I say and don't find resonance. This journey about awakening is exactly that. It's your awakening. It's your personal journey. And my personal life happens to sort of coincide with this journey that I'm on. So I do ask and implore your patience for that. I hope all of you have a wonderful and fantastic evening. It's going to be a very fun and exciting time as we go into 2023. We could see a second attempt at a pandemic. We're seeing some of that in the narrative prep, or we might not. We could see an enormous destabilization of power structures in the world, and I believe that we will see that. There's just a very large amount of ways left that this could all go. This is the most strenuous portion, I believe, in these operations thus far to date, and that goes back nearly 10 years. These operations have been in planning and sort of design phase for a long time, and were implemented many years ago to bring down this worldwide group of evil. The U.S. continuity of government situation is actually a byproduct of that. And many of us out there first became awake realizing that the U.S. continuity of government situation was real. So understanding that the level is even higher than that helps us understand moving forward through our process here, our awakening process, just how big this is and how it affects all of us personally. And so, sort of with that being said, go in peace, go in love, go in unity and unification. This is an exciting time to be alive. This is an incredible time to appreciate things that you've been given the sight to see, and to appreciate things that are yet to come. And so I leave you tonight with hopefulness and some encouragement, and my love to each of you, and to your families and friends and loved ones and sleepers and everyone. I look very forward to being with you again soon. I will be on air again more quickly than I was these most recent files. Things, like I said, sort of accelerated at the end of the year, and some stuff had to be prioritized over others, but I will be more regular. Look out for those, and I will do my best to keep the channel updated with very current information that helps us understand where we are and where we're going. My blessings to all of you tonight. Have a wonderful new year. Have an excellent celebration with family. And we're going to go through the end phases of this, sort of running all of the way across the line. One of the things I was always taught running a competitive sport is you save your all for that very last few feet, the very last sprint, if you will, and we're rapidly coming up on that. Unstoppable forces are converging between military operations, economic and geopolitical operations, and counterintelligence narrative shift operations to wake the masses of the world. When that convergence goes public, it's going to be public in a very big way. And I think many of us out there will be very excited and very vindicated. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. This is SGAnon, and I'll talk to you again soon. Stay safe. Happy New Year. Thanks. Bye-bye.